Welcome to the Loaded Goat. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Chris.
How you doing?
I'm good. It's kind of the year where I start to think about taxes.
Yeah.
Am I going to, get into the papers, doing things like that? So that's always kind of more stress for me than it actually ever is. I worry a lot about the taxes.
About how you're going to avoid paying them?
Yeah. Yeah. You?
Yeah. I'm pulling together my stuff for my taxes, and that's kind of that.
Cool. Good for you.
Yeah. I will tell you, if I was Mr. Frisbee, I probably wouldn't be spending a whole lot of time worrying about taxes.
No, the government's just going to take it all.
Because I'll tell you, so today we're doing Aunt Bee the Crusader. This is not one of my favorite episodes.
I would summarize this to temperance trumps eminent domain.
Very good. So, eminent domain, there are not a lot of political issues that I get very worked up about. I will get a little fired up about eminent domain.
Let's hear it. Get fired up.
Now, I'm not saying I get fired up. First of all, I'm just always a little bit like, with eminent domain, I'm very much of the mindset that you buy a house, you live in a place, the notion of it being taken away for government progress because you don't have any sort of other means other than your land is, to me, can be a great travesty. And I think that is something that I can get fired up about. I mean, you see that in a number of ways. So I can also understand that, infrastructure has to be built in X, Y, and Z, but it is something I can get a little fired up about. It is also something where it's kind of the same trope of Aunt Bee being manipulated. And it does not share a critical plot point until the very end, that he turned down a hefty sum for his place.
Yeah. When I saw this episode, I was like, oh, cool. I wonder who's going to swindle Aunt Bee next. But then I liked the guy. I liked Frisbee. But I don't like throwing Frisbee, but I liked Frisbee, So there's that.
You don't like throwing Frisbees?
My thought on eminent domain is like my family's cabin is split because there's the highway went through it and bisected the land. So I've always kind of thought about it in terms of like, sometimes it passes through. But I was surprised when they're like, oh, we're going to just pave directly over your house. It's like, this is where we can have curves in roads,
Yeah.
Like we can skirt something on the outside. We're taking a little bit of people's land so that you can get from point A to point B, which will inevitably benefit you. But like flattening the house, I would say it's weak and poor planning by bureaucracy. And it just makes me sick to see this type of mediocrity.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, first of all, I don't mean to brag, but I read books.
Oh,
and
wow. Cool.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? And right now I am reading The Power Broker by Robert Caro, which is about Robert Moses and how he basically reshaped New York. And it's in the chapter I'm reading right now is just focusing on how he displaced thousands of families and basically paved over their neighborhood.
Did he also collaborate with Counting Crows?
No.
Paved Paradise?
First of all, they didn't write that song. They covered that song.
Then who wrote it?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but it wasn't them. It's just Adam Duritz said, oh, I can sing this. This is another song for me to sound whiny when I sing. So you
would know the lead singer of CC.
Was CC. But anyway, it's a detailed book about
interesting
people having, about power. Anyway, want to dive in
to the book or the TV show?
To the TV show, like you've ever read a book.
Yeah, yeah. I would much rather do the episode.
Yeah. So this episode first aired on January 20th, 1964. It was written by John Whedon, who I've mentioned before is the grandfather of Joss Whedon. And it is...
Who is that?
Joss Whedon is the guy who's the writer who he did Firefly. He did.
Oh yeah, you've talked about this guy before.
He did the first Avengers movie. He's done a number, but he's but his grandfather, had apparently been writing for years and decades. And there are certain episodes. We always talk about certain episodes that seem timeless. And we talk about certain episodes that don't seem like they aged very well. This is an episode that doesn't feel like it aged very well.
It's just incongruent. And then the ending, you're like, what a bunch of little phonies.
Yeah. So we open with Mr. Frisbee, the Eggman, on the Taylor porch. Mr. Frisbee is played by Charles Lane. He was a character actor whose career spanned 72 years, and he lived to be 102.
Oh, wow. That's so
Yeah,
long.
that is a long time.
It's a long
And
time.
he has brought Bo his chicken, and Opie comes out and pets it. And he gives Opie his chicken, and he gives Aunt Bee what is basically a mug, but they call it a mustache cup.
Yeah, they talk about that like that's a thing that we all know. And that, like, to me, this is like the mustache mug is something that I would have thought emerged the stay home goods opened. You know, you buy your Live, Laugh, Love, you get your mustache mug, and you move on about your day.
Yeah. I'll get you a mustache. That would be I need to look this up. I should have looked this up before the show.
Yeah. Maybe it's like that mustache finger that the hipsters do.
Yeah, maybe
but
so.
I also think giving a kid a chicken or a rooster, wow, what a good jab at the parents.
I mean, can you imagine? I can't imagine my friends with children if I walked up to them and just gave their kid a chicken.
Yeah, it's just terrible.
I mean, and they don't say anything. What I've often thought would be the most awesome gift is to buy like a $25 gift card to an amusement park, like to Disney World or Six Flags or something like that.
Something that only gets you 10% in the door.
Yeah, 10% in the door. And you give it to the kid, and the kid's so excited. And you're like, all right, ball's in your court now.
I love it.
Yeah. So it turns out Mr. Frisbee is being evicted. And Aunt Bee says she's going to go to the jail to talk to Andy. And at the jail, Andy is letting Otis leave, but Barney wants to ask him where he is getting his booze. And you're almost kind of like, I've seen this before. You're almost like, you watch this, you're like, oh, I wonder where the booze is. And Andy basically does let Barney ask, and Otis says he can't say. So Barney wants to give him the third degree, and Andy lets him. And Barney tries with a ruler, and he hurts his hand. He gets in Otis' face, but he breathes on him, and his breath is just terrible. And then he tries to shine a light in his face, but the lamp keeps falling.
It's a good scene. I love it. What does Otis say? He's like, I can't betray. It like talks about, it reminded me of his other line.
I can't look at myself, or I can't live with myself, or something like that.
Talks about like, it's his anniversary. It's like, what? For the first time I got drunk.
First time I got drunk. Aunt Bee comes in and sees Otis and suggests that he speak with Reverend Tucker. So it's clearly like she's concerned about him and his alcohol. And then she tells him about Mr. Frisbee's problems about the highway being built. And Barney starts to go off on government employees until Andy reminds him that they're government employees too. If you called every government employee who goes off on other government employees a Barney Fife, I feel like half the state and federal and local workforce would be called Barney Fifes.
Yeah. And that's why you're going to get audited this year.
And Andy then explains to Aunt Bee why they need the highway, and Barney keeps backing him up. And Aunt Bee says Andy never liked Mr. Frisbee, and basically Andy doesn't argue with that, but he says that's not the point. And then Aunt Bee,
the backstory there. There's a backstory. We don't know it.
Yeah, I don't know. But then Aunt Bee then storms off and says Andy should go to church more often. And Barney says that may be a good idea. And Barney tells Andy to shut up.
It's funny. I like it.
And then back at the Taylor household, Andy comes up as Opie is building a chicken coop and learns about the chicken and the mustache cup. I mean, I'm kind of like, the mustache cup's one thing, but if I got home and I found out my son had been given a chicken without my knowledge or my say-so in my basically neighborhood house, I would have an issue.
Yeah, and I'd want a drink.
Oh, from the mustache cup. And then he thinks... And basically, Andy thinks Mr. Frisbee is trying to manipulate them. And Aunt Bee chews him out and storms off. And Aunt Bee says she's eating her dinner in the kitchen. And Andy storms off and we go to commercial.
I liked this scene. So she's in the kitchen. He's there. Barney's right. Or Opie's going back and forth, giving the feedback. And he's like, you know what you could tell her? And then he walks off. And I feel like he's swearing at her and calling her mean names. But it was like more of a like sassy... It was a little bit further like below the fold than I expected from the show.
Yeah.
Don't you think he called her like a swear word when he walked off?
I don't think he called her a swear word. I think he started to say something and then he stopped himself and he left.
Yeah. I don't know. I got a heavy comedic vibe from that moment.
This is all for Mr. Frisbee, who we've never heard of before. But man, Aunt Bee is going to the mat for Mr. Frisbee.
Yeah. Well, I mean, eggs, if she doesn't buy her eggs from a local source, think about how expensive they're going to be.
Especially now. This episode's production and artwork are managed by Pod Machine, who does great work at a great rate. If you want to learn more about this service, go to podmachine.com. You can also get a 10% discount by entering Loaded Goat in the promo section if you purchase one of their plans. So after the break, Andy and Opie are at the breakfast table. Opie brings up Mr. Frisbee again, and Andy's just not having it. And Opie leaves, and Barney comes in, and Andy tells him what he thinks Mr. Frisbee is doing. They leave and pull up to the jail, where Aunt Bee has organized a protest with the ladies in town.
Such a use of all that collective power.
I feel like there is a code that Aunt Bee is violating here.
Yeah, I would agree. So, like in advocacy, right? You got inside baseball and outside baseball. Your outside baseball, your grassroots stuff is just to get the attention of people that have the ear of the decision maker. Aunt Bee already has that. So what is she creating a ruckus for when she could just go into the office and have that conversation directly? You don't need all this public pressure yet, baby.
No, and Aunt Bee is what we would call the top of grass tops.
She is the top of grass tops. She raised the child and feeds him every day.
Yeah. And she can't sway him because she is wrong. And and so Andy goes inside and Barney basically tells the ladies to go home and rest, which is just so offensive. And then he tries to argue with them and makes the situation worse. Barney comes in, doesn't know what to do, and Andy says they'll get tired and go home, and Barney is quite disturbed. They later get a call that says the bulldozer is at Mr. Frisbee's house, and they leave to head there. And Barney opens the door, and the protesters are gone. Where do you think they are, Christopher?
Oh, gosh. I imagine that they took it all the way to the Supreme Court.
Or they went to Mr. Frisbee's, where they were blocking the bulldozer. Did. Yeah, and they're singing songs like "We Shall Not Be Moved" and chanting "Stand Your Ground," a phrase that has not aged well.
No, I didn't pick up on that. Yeah, I've had my moments with protests, and I'm pro protest, but I have found it no matter how much I care about the issue, I get so annoyed by the chants. I just can't. They just get old. They get old fast.
Here's my thing on this. If you go to brunch after your protest, it's not a protest.
All right.
We got out and said a few things, and then we went to eat, and we enjoyed the rest of our day. You're not sleeping at the Lincoln Memorial or shutting down traffic.
This is when we learned that Aaron was a part of Occupy Wall Street, and it's just now something clear on it.
I was not a part of Occupy Wall Street, but if it comes to protesting, I'm skipping the Saturday morning march, and I'm going straight for sit-ins. Okay.
All right.
So Barney goes in to move all the chickens and the other stuff to get it out of the house, and he and Opie go looking for Bo. They later have everything outside, and Opie hears Bo in the back and goes to look for him. Mr. Frisbee and the ladies refuse to move, and Opie brings out Bo. And if there's nothing funnier than animal abuse of a bird being fed alcohol.
I would be more likely to assume that bird had whirling disease, which I don't think birds get. It's like a fish thing. Then that bird is drunk. That looks like a drunk chicken.
I mean, it's like that episode of The Wire where the guy buys the duck and he feeds him whiskey and the duck dies. You kind of like, I don't think Bo is long for this world.
No.
And so Opie says he
doesn't have the rooster burp or the chicken burp.
Probably too much production cost. And burping really wasn't a thing back. I mean, it was a thing. People did it, but it wasn't a thing you put on TV back in the 60s.
That's true. It came forward with, I know this from Dr. Seuss, I think was the first one to write it and normalize it.
I once had this classmate who insisted that to all of us that she did not pass gas.
Nice. Good for her.
Nobody believed her. We all thought it was the biggest lie you've ever heard. But she somehow just was like, I don't do this.
It seems like a weird thing for her to put herself in the third degree for, right?
Well, I mean, you're gonna be watched like a hawk.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So basically Andy figures out what's going on. He tells Barney to stall everyone, and he tries to lead them in a song. And Andy returns with a still, which is one of 5 apparently, and the ladies are horrified. And that's when we finally learn. It's not that they're just taking his property. They offered him more than the land was worth, and he turned it down.
Which, like, do you think that that's why the protesters turn on him, or that they are so upset that he's a moonshiner?
I mean, I personally think at the time, the message of this episode was, look at these. I mean, I don't mean to be cynical, but I felt like it's kind of framed it. Look at these women getting manipulated.
Okay. All right.
Am I wrong?
No, I just thought it showed like the depth of how much they actually cared. I was just, they're not like you camping outside the White House, for 25 years.
Yeah, which I have not done.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. I just felt like this is just another episode where Aunt Bee gets basically taken by
Harvey Bullock could have done better.
By a dude. Oh yeah, Harvey Bullock and Jennifer Estelle and Everett Greenbaum wouldn't have touched this garbage. I mean, this is just some and it is one of these things where I'm just like, in these episodes, she's always kind of like, maybe she's just not a very good judge of character.
Yeah, I think so.
But she gets all the ladies in town to go with her.
She's a good community organizer.
She is a good community organizer, but the whole thing's just kind of like I don't know. I just kind of was like, I've seen this before. It's just there. It depends on what day of the week it is where I'm like, I don't want to watch Aunt Bee again. I don't really like episodes where Aunt Bee gets swindled.
I would agree.
Yeah. So they rip into Mr. Frisbee. We go to commercial. In the epilogue, Andy comes into the jail and apologizes to Andy. She then tries to make her case, and Andy's finally like, I'm not having any more of this. You should have seen this coming. I mean, it's kind of just disjointed. It's still kind of just uncomfortable. If you don't have Barney sitting there parroting everything they say, and then them telling him to shut up, and him storming off saying they can't stand someone with a mind of his own. I mean, if he's not there for, which I mean, I'm saying that's why he's a crucial part of the show. But if he's not there for these scenes, they're like chew on your wrist, kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'd agree. Totally.
So now that I've said my piece on this, how many whistles would you give this?
It was fine to watch, but it wasn't like nothing special. I didn't mind it. So I'm going to give it a 5.
I'm going with 5 as well.
Okay.
Any final thoughts?
It's good to see a swing and a miss. You can't be Barry Bonds in it out, all the time. Sometimes you got to get like a Chuck Knobloch in there to try to miss,
So if they were Barry Bondsing it, you think they would be, I don't know how you cheat when it comes to writing sitcoms.
Yeah. You can tell by what I said that I haven't been a sports fan since 2001. And so I kind of got bored with sports even before the steroiding came out. So I was just kind of pulling out the one all-star I know, and then the other name I could pull out of my head.
Yeah. I should also say all that allegedly. So that's the thing I should clarify. Allegedly. And then sometimes even in the great run of this show, you're going to have, you're not going to have a misfire, but you're going to have a so-so. And this is a so-so. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you think about it, subscribe or leave a comment. Next week, Andy and Don author Daniel DeVasay will join us for Barney's Sidecar. And until then, Christopher, if someone offers you a free chicken, be skeptical.
I'm going to mail it to you.